This conference will now be recorded.
It is now my pleasure to introduce a very senior member of the Virginia House of Delegates and someone who represents the central portion of Arlington along Columbia Pike and so on. And this is our delegate, Alfonso Lopez, who I hope will talk to us about the current situation in terms of transition and the 2020 elections and so on. Alfonso, the floor is yours.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to come and chat with you today. We've had a very interesting, that's a weighted word, or unweighted word, election cycle. And by very, very slim margins, as of this morning, new numbers have come out for a bunch of provisional ballots around the state. For the statewide candidates, and then also for two still outstanding House of Delegates campaigns, the 91st and the 85th, which are both in the Hampton Roads, Virginia Beach area. Alex Askew is the incumbent, and Martha Mugler. Martha Mugler is down 94 votes as of this morning, and Alex Askew is down approximately 125 votes as of this morning. So what we're talking about here is the difference between the majority and the minority in the House of Delegates. Out of 3.1 million plus ballots cast is less than 250 votes over two different House of Delegates districts. To say that this has been a nail biter is an understatement, and to also say that it has been incredibly close is an understatement. As of this morning, Mark Herring is only down 27,000 votes. Hala Ayala is down 50,000 votes, and Terry McAuliffe is down around 65,000 votes after the new numbers came in. What does that mean? That means that this is a very divided state in terms of how this election panned out. That being said, the after action numbers that we're getting are fascinating in terms of who did not show up, and the percentage of folks on the Democratic side who've consistently voted in Democratic elections who did not show, just from last year, in fact, who did not show up this year. And then also who crossed over. What's also interesting is that this was not a depressed turnout on the Democratic side. You had approximately 200,000 additional Democratic votes. You could say, even though Mark Herring lost the election, if you just took the number of votes he got for the Attorney General spot, he would have been, before this year, the top vote getter for any statewide election in the history of Virginia. So you've had a significant increase in the number of voters this year, an increase in the number of ethnic communities voting, Latinos, Asian Americans, African Americans, but also what you've seen over this past election is a explosion of rural voters that have not come out over the last 15, 20 years. And so Arlington was again I think one of the top Democratic turnout jurisdictions in the Commonwealth, around 77% of the vote, 76% of the vote, and a significant margin of Democratic votes that but it's also interesting to find out in the after action reports how the Republicans knew they could not win in Northern Virginia, but if they just got their numbers, their margins up slightly, they were hoping for 43, 44% of the vote. If they got to there, they knew that they could, and all their numbers hit across the state, they could actually do well and possibly win. Well, they got 42%, which is a significant jump in Northern Virginia. and they actually got a significant increase in the number of Republican voters in Arlington relative to years past. Now, significant is like 4 points, but it's not. It definitely helps with their statewide goals. So, what does this mean? This means that a great deal of the work that we have been doing in terms of social justice, economic stability, job creation, affordable housing, education funding, social safety net issues, healthcare issues. Not only are we not going to be able to take the next steps this coming session for those issue areas, but we are worried very much so about efforts to roll those initiatives back. Now, the public comments from the incoming, Todd Gilbert, is that, well, they're going to limit the kind of issues that they'll focus on, and they will not, try to go as far to the right as their members would want them to go. The issue for him is that his caucus of 52, there are at least 10 members of his caucus who are, anybody in the call remember Bob Marshall? Raise your hand if you remember Bob Marshall from Prince William County. All right. There are at least 10 members of his caucus who are Bob Marshall on steroids. And we believe that they will not be able to help themselves when it comes to a lot of these issues, from sensible gun violence prevention to social safety issues to women's right to choose. And what does that mean? That means that right now there's a fight between 6, 7, 8 members of the Republican caucus to see who's going to put in the Texas abortion bill. There's a fight in the Republican caucus to see who's going to put in the Georgia voting bill. And we are very concerned. And there's a fight in their caucus to see who's going to be putting in all of the bills to roll back universal background checks and red flag laws. And I'm concerned, considering how close the margins are on the Senate side, that they might have the votes to, if it gets to the floor on the Senate side, to overturn some of these positive steps we took. So I am, the House Democratic Caucus has been meeting rather consistently, basically regularly, laying out the groundwork for what we're going to be doing as a caucus next year. We have our elections on Sunday down in Richmond. I hope to stay as the Democratic whip, as a member of the calendar team, the senior leadership team. I believe that Eileen Fillicorn will remain as the leader. Charnel Herring will become the caucus chair, and we're going to take it back. The fact is that these are hair's breadth differences in terms of vote turnout.
Alfonso,
and
maybe
sure.
Just to give background.
Let me just answer questions if that's okay.
No, but just to give background before we get to the questions, because I think this is very confusing. When does the new redistricting take effect? When will the House of Delegates next be up for election? And will the redistricting help the situation? In other words, if everybody votes exactly as they voted this year under the new map, would we have a different outcome statewide in terms of who has the majority? And is there any legal actions pending? Have we drummed up all the provisional ballots that we were supposed to drum up by Friday?
That's still okay. Let me take each of those pieces. Yes, we are still in the process of canvassing and drumming up all of the provisional ballots. that process is still going forward. There are lawyers all over Poquoson and Virginia Beach, in the 91st and the 85th, and in other targeted spots around the Commonwealth where they have not completed tallying the votes. And so that is still ongoing. We hope to have some answers by today or by the end of the week. But no matter what, both Askew and Mugler are within the 0.5 percentage point automatic recount level. So in each case, you're going to see an automatic recount probably on the 15th of November. So none of this is set. The second thing is that there are current pieces of litigation, one from Paul Goldman, basically saying that the election we just had is illegal, based on what happened with the census data and the lateness of it, and that there were other ways to cure the process, and that this election needs to be thrown out, which is interesting. But then we have to have an election this year or this coming year. So we would have not unlike what we did in 1981, 1982, and 1983, where we had when they were unpacking the multi-member districts in Virginia based on the initiative back then. We would potentially have an election this year, and then again in the House delegates next year at the same time as the congressional districts, and then again in 23. Now, if I were a betting man, I would say that it is likely that that happens. But there have been no final decisions made. In terms of the redistricting process as it stands right now, according to the state Supreme Court, they are moving incredibly fast, and their target is to have new maps out by December 15th for the General Assembly to vote on. Or to see, not to vote on, to see. And we will see where those maps are, and then we will have primaries in June and another election in, or possibly primaries in June, another election in November of next year.
Okay, but assuming that the maps turn out to reflect the principles of the constitutional amendment, namely compact districts, et cetera, do you think that if everybody who voted this year voted next time, the caucus split would be different and we have the majority?
Yes, that's the mega question, Bob. And just based on demographic shifts and population shifts, Southwest Virginia and Southside Virginia are going to lose at least one, most likely two, possibly three seats. And what does that mean? That means that they're going to have to draw. What's the old joke? You can walk across the 49th district that I represent 5 times in an afternoon. Israel O'Quinn, who represents Bristol and that whole region, it takes him 4.5 hours to drive across his district, because there are not 89,000 people within 4 hours of each other down there, versus everyone lives in apartments and townhouses around my neck of the woods. So there's a very good chance, if we're at 52-48, that if we had the new maps, we would be at 50-50 no matter what happened. But then if you think about the compactness issues and how by the end of the process, the House and Senate maps were coming out of the bipartisan commission, that looked like a much more fair map that accounted for at least a 55, 53, 54 seat Democratic majority.
Now, we all know that fundraising by members of the House of Delegates is illegal during the session, which starts in January. So is the caucus doing anything between now and January to get resources to carry on these various fights?
Yes.
So what do we do as individuals?
Well, one, forums like this are amazing. Two, I would actually encourage folks to engage with and donate to your local electeds, your local elected delegates. And I can tell you that I have already $100,000 in the bank. I'm going to try to raise more between now and Election Day, because as the majority whip for the House, or the Democratic whip for the House Democrats, my job is to help everyone else with their elections. And so, for instance, Eileen Fillicorn raised a record amount of money for the House Democrats. She gave away $5.1 million last I checked. Charnel Herring gave away a record for the majority leader of any party of $1.2 million. And honestly, if the House Democratic Caucus had not done the amazing work it did in terms of fundraising, you could have, I believe that the 48 seat caucus we have would be closer to 43 or 42. But to answer your question, Bob, I would definitely understand where we are with this process and encourage folks to donate to Democratic members of the House Democratic Caucus and the state Senate.
Okay. Why don't we take a few more questions from other people on the call? I don't mean to dominate things, but I wanted to make sure that Alfonso got the full message out. Does someone have a question of Alfonso? Mike Murtha? Yes, Mike?
Yeah, that's just me. No
Hey, Mike.
Hi there.
Oh, no question from Alfonso. Dr. Joe, do you have a question? Unmute yourself, please. Dr. Joe, we have to unmute you.
Hi, Alfonso. I have something else I wanted to discuss with you concerning a National Electronics Museum. But I do think that Rick Sullivan had done a really great job of recruiting candidates around the state and so on. Is there an effort to develop new talent and make sure that we, particularly in the south part of the state, have really strong candidates?
Yes. Part of what we're doing in terms of our work is, and in terms of what I'm doing as well, is creating dossiers for each of our candidates and people who might have lost. Everyone who ran for the House delegates this year, I'm trying to find out several answers to several questions. What are the major issues where you think your opponent, the new member or the incumbent member, has failed the community? What are some projects specifically that are needed in the community, and how long have those projects languished? What are the sort of the intangibles that we should know about? And we're also encouraging a number of these candidates who ran this time and came very, very close to run again. And we're also reaching out fairly consistently with rural Democrats across the state. These are sizable populations. And we know that there was, for us, a lot of the downturn in overall turnout amongst Democrats was in these rural communities, where they would definitely voted in the Biden election, but they did not vote in this election. So not that they switched over to vote for Youngkin, but they just didn't vote. And we're talking about, thousands upon thousands of rural Democrats. Now, would those have potentially swung an election in the 7th district or the 6th district or something? Doubtful, but it would have had a much bigger impact for us at the statewide level. And so it's we're in a tough spot now that, Chris Hurst and Sam Rasool are the only people who are Democrats outside of the Crescent and the more urban, suburban, and exurban areas of Virginia. And I think we have several good candidates out there. And I also think that with these new maps, and that addresses some of the compactness issues, that it'll be a much better environment for some of our candidates. So a a 35-point loss, like a 35 to 65 loss, might be closer to a 45-55 district after we have the new maps. And then you have the ability to actually dodge and weave and maybe create some running room.
Any other questions for Alfonso? Okay. Well, we want to thank you again, and we wish you Godspeed and every success in your efforts on behalf of the caucus and on behalf of the residents of the 49th district. Yeah, everybody's applauding. Good.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, and now we're also very pleased to be joined by our county board member, Takis Karantonis. You know, we had a lot of bad news on last Tuesday night, but the one bright spot was that Takis won and Mary won, and so we certainly think that it's appropriate for him to come and visit us on the occasion of his re-election. He was elected in a special election. Now he's won his own full term to the county board, and we congratulate you, Takis.
Bob, one quick thing real quick.
Yes, please, please.
Before I go, I want to thank everybody for all you do in the community. Thank you for your years of service to the community, and I do appreciate this organization and what you guys accomplish and the level of discourse you bring to things. So thank you very much for all that you do, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. Okay, Takis, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't think of my election with all your help as the only bright spot. I mean, let's see that we also, I mean, Alfonso just logged off. We got Alfonso elected as well. We got all our delegates here in Arlington re-elected. This is a very strong representation for us in Richmond, also very capable in working under difficult conditions, in thinking strategically and advancing the Commonwealth. I overheard Alfonso saying, you know, how we want to refocus and work also with rural Democrats, etc. I just spent 4 long days in more rural Virginia, just to take some time off, and I had this opportunity. There's amazing talent out there, amazing ideas, a lot of energy, and I think we can tap into that again and come back very strongly just next year, this year, in the midterm year. So with regards to Arlington, we had a very long election period. I feel that I've been campaigning for basically 18, 19 months continuously. I do think that Arlingtonians in their vast majority focus on very essential issues that the county board and democratic-led governance has delivered on housing, on working rights, on governance, on the environment. I also think that in general, Arlingtonians feel that we're listening to them, that we are that we absorb their critique, their issues, including on schools and education that turned out to be a critical issue this year, and in the minds of many people, as it is normal and after a long pandemic and still ongoing. So I think that I could connect even more and deeper with Arlington's many constituencies. And now for me, the next step, actually looking forward, the next step is to build up a better connected relationships with all these diverse constituencies. Arlington is changing. We have always had a part of Arlington that was very transient, so about 15-20% sometimes of the population that comes in and goes after a while, especially in the corridor. So this will need additional attention, but this is also at the same time it is a challenge it is also an opportunity, because these are the constituencies where we can talk about housing. We can say, for example, look, housing affordability is a major issue here. We need to find ways to increase supply where we can afford it, with where we have metro and other assets that we can leverage. And these constituents really understand that. The key to frame these issues better and in a more consistent way is to work on them between elections as well. So I'm very committed to that. You will see, new forms of communication with communities, like going back to holding some town halls, neighborhood town halls. I'm walking neighborhoods right now with with the civic associations. I started already last year, and this was not immediately connected to my election, but to my work as a board member. So I'm discovering every day something new. Now, what struck me, what I found very interesting in this past campaign were two things, politically speaking. First of all, the focus that our opponents, both or the three of them, were running as independents. One, Mike Cantwell, in my opinion, is the most conservative of all, very close to be a Republican, and he was the only one who openly testified against collective bargaining or restoring collective bargaining in Arlington. He called it a bad deal for Arlington's taxpayer. This is a classical Republican discussion. He didn't even discuss details. I know several Democrats who would have issues with that, but this was kind of wholesale, and that was quite an interesting starter. Then he basically campaigned against affordable housing by saying that he doesn't believe in government programs supporting people of moderate and lower income. He actually thinks that we have sufficient affordable housing, market rate affordable housing in Arlington, which goes against the grain of our general understanding of the measured result of 20 years of losing almost 80% of our affordable housing stock for households who make 60% of the area median income or less. So this was quite striking to me, that this kind of positions could be floated in Arlington, in a place where we had a general understanding that we have a housing issue, we have a housing problem, and we need to find the best solutions for that. There was a lot of negative campaigning, a lot of negative partisanship. I think that we were well advised not to respond in kind, but to paint a picture of Arlington as we see it going forward. As we take on issues and we take on problems, we manage growth, we focus on improving our environment, and we focus on deliverables in transportation, in schools, in housing, and we build from there. I believe that most Arlingtonians and younger Arlingtonians as well saw value in a positive narrative going forward, and they wouldn't buy the more negative, only criticizing or only critical narrative that my opponents have been fielding for the most part. Ms. Clement, Dr. Clement, has been campaigning for, I believe this was her 10th year in different ways. I was surprised about, a little bit taken aback about how decisively negative and darker negative the narrative has become. Make no mistake. While I could easily interpret that as a kind of a desperation and not being able to formulate a positive vision for the place or no vision at all, but I'm not doing that. I do think that this has a method. The method is to create a continuous stream of a negative atmosphere, an atmosphere of where everything that the county board does or has accomplished is highlighted only from any downside it may have, only from the critical point. And I take that very seriously. I do think that other elected Democrats take that very seriously as well. It happened. Also, you can extrapolate that to the Virginia election. One critique that I kind of understand and take very seriously is that we failed to run a campaign that would highlight the tremendous accomplishments of the last 2 to 3 years. So especially, and I believe that this is a lesson that I take home here to try to do a even better job in showcasing how well we got things done in Arlington, especially after a very successful managing of the pandemic. It is kind of, I have to say, it fills me with many thoughts on how to frame the delivery of governance during these tough times for everybody, and having kept people here, having kept people safe and sound and healthy, and having avoided catastrophic scenario like the ones that were very, very well possible at the beginning of the pandemic, and they haven't materialized because we did something about it. So anyway, bottom line, thank you so much for all your work, all your support, and onwards. We are looking into a very active, interesting year ahead, and I am, I take that with a lot of energy now, and I will be fighting on the first line to, get as much as accomplished as possible in the midterm year. So, open to your questions.
Yes, we appreciate you taking a few questions, and I do appreciate your philosophical reflections. I also agree. I've been around Arlington now for a few decades, and it used to be that it was sort of like a pothole filling issue. The typical interaction between the county board and the citizens was, why haven't you filled the pothole in front of my house? And now, particularly with the national climate, where the legitimacy and effectiveness of government is deliberately attacked and called into question, to the point where Arlington police were called in to clear Lafayette Square of protesters, to the point that we had to discuss with the Virginia National Guard protecting the Capitol against insurrectionists on January 6th. It's really a very strategic evolution from the pothole to the existence of democracy. So I appreciate you reflecting on that. I would like to know, particularly given that voter intent is now so important, how you are going on the implementation of ranked choice voting, which would essentially make the election results better mirror the spectrum of sentiment among the voters.
So we already started that process of analyzing and finding out what the technical requirements for that are. This is not so easy, especially when we have a multi-seat election, so a two-people election, for example, like we will have in 2023. The registrar has already presented on this. We are working with myself, with my colleagues. I'm positive of that. I am here because of the ranked choice votes. So that happened in the primary after Eric Gutschall's passing. So I'm positive of that. I'm supportive of the idea of this. I just want to make sure that this is something that is scalable and applicable, and that we find voters to, and that we educate voters. The most difficult part of this is to educate on, in a system that nobody here in Arlington is familiar with, how to work with this system. And that starts with us Democrats, by the way. We also need to understand what the political implications are for that, from this. For example, I could tell you today that I have absolutely no problem with applying that to primary elections. But this is because I know that most Democrats in future campaigns, and also our bench of candidates, etc., know how to deal with this, how to frame the narrative, etc. One of the issues of one of the advantages of ranked choice voting is that it is said to reduce polarizing politics, which I have to say, it is possible. I mean, I agree with this in general. We don't have, for now, we don't have this polarizing politics in Arlington. However, they can be introduced anytime, from the exterior. Nationalizing elections, as Bob, you're absolutely right. Nationalizing even issues is a very big issue, and a great a risk for our democracy right now. Look what happened with schools issues. We'll look what happened in Loudoun. I would even say that even in a ranked choice voting system, we cannot avoid this introduction of external strategic political messaging that can undermine our communities and our political climate here. The antidote to that, before I get to ranked choice, is for Democrats to make sure that we are continuously present in the community, that we continuously listen to all constituencies, that we take them very seriously, that we process their needs, that we process their aspirations, that we understand deeply the level of problems they have, and we propose solutions for these problems timely, so that we have to be in all fields, everything, not only in few ones. So one thing that I take very seriously, for example, because of COVID and because of the summer of 2020, I do believe that our messaging in general was very much focused in the things that came up: racial equity, social justice, and also health. And all of a sudden, other things were still ongoing, and we didn't frame them correctly, or we didn't accomplish to give them their correct dimension in the political discourse. So these things go hand in hand. So I consider my job to be to keep an active list of all the issues that we have to respond to and have political solutions for. Ranked choice will be a good discussion here in Arlington, very good discussion. I approach that with a positive predisposition, especially for Democratic primaries. And right now, I want to also to know from experts and think a little bit through multi-seat scenario, so that we make sure that we have the best possible and the most representative position there.
I'll be happy to get together with you offline, but I'm sure other people here at lunch have other pressing questions. So who has a question for Takis? Anyone have a question for Takis? Yes, Marks.
Marks, you are muted.
Sorry about that.
Great.
It's early, but budget question.
Sure.
There's some influx of funds, but I also see some things coming possibly out of Richmond that will either take away options for the local jurisdictions or put in some restraints. What do you see overall as our budget status for the county?
So let me say one thing. During the pandemic, the year immediately before 2019 and 2020, these have been very cautious years. So the county board, myself included, we have been, since we didn't know what the real impact of the pandemic will be, what the real response of the federal government will be, how households will fare. So we're very, very cautious. And one thing that we didn't prioritize was compensation for our staff and you know, catching up with several years of very, very small wage increases or none. So this year, I can anticipate already that this is an area where we will be catching up, and this is entirely within our jurisdiction. From Richmond, I don't know what we have to expect right now. The new governor is not, I mean, the governor-elect is not in office yet. We don't know exactly what we will see. We do anticipate that Governor Northam will still propose the budget for the next fiscal year. So we will try to trace that and see if there are impacts. I'm an alum of the Sorensen Institute, so I have no problem with speaking with Republicans, working with Republicans. I very much hope we're not going to be reverting to to the Stone Age of everything that Arlington ever proposes is denied because it's Arlington. Okay, so I very much hope that we are not going to go back there, but there will be consequences of this election. I am specifically worried about consequences about housing support. One of the major Democratic accomplishments, and Delegate Lopez was a leader in this, was the putting serious money into the state housing support funding, and we may see a different policy there, either less money going into the fund or the money out of the fund being distributed to regions that are not us in Northern Virginia. The problem with Northern Virginia is that everything in our jurisdictions is really extremely expensive. So you build less units for the money than you can afford to build in Norfolk or in Lynchburg or in other places, and we may lose some support there. We always tried to use extra money to make up for our handicap handicap that we're in a more expensive place. And that may not be the case anymore. But I wouldn't like to speculate already. Happy to come back in January, February, and discuss the specific on that. Another area where I can see a cooling of state in our collaboration with the state could be the environmental part. There is the Clean Economy Act. The future of the Clean Economy Act is right now in jeopardy. I don't think that we will see any progress in any of the deliverables of the Clean Economy Act, but I'm not losing hope. I will be fighting for this, and there are issues that even Republicans can embrace. Dominion Power was not into renewables until relatively recently. Now they are into renewables. I may not like the company, but that doesn't mean that there's zero common ground, that the Venn diagram doesn't have not a single point of coincidence there. So I'm looking for the silver lining right now, but I don't know where it is.
Thanks.
Another question for Takis, anybody? Okay, I'd like to ask you, what do you think is the future of bond referenda? We won all 4 bond referenda, I'm very proud to say, by like 70+% margins. But do you anticipate we're going to have another round of referenda next year in a congressional year?
We normally do them every 2 years. So the we will have a CIP discussion next year. So a capital investment plan, a discussion for the 10-year period. We went now 2 years in a row with short-term CIPs. So 1 year, 3 year / 1 year CIPs. So we will go back to our strategic planning, capital investment planning in June, July next year. So the referenda sequence and what we want to pay with these will be the same. What I would also anticipate is that the same relatively fiscally prudent approach will apply to any future CIP as well. The future, we're not going to give up on our AAA, on wanting to be compliant with AAA bond rating. Under no circumstances we want to jeopardize this. So our debt service will be always capped to less than 10%. Our contribution to reserves will always be robust. So this will continue, and this is a priority. It's for me a priority as well. And so we will ask Arlingtonians for capital investment that is consistent with a AAA bond rating. To the degree that we pay off, we will be borrowing for long-term capital investments. As an economist, I have to tell you that the news about inflation and the persistence of the current inflation, as much as I understand and I agree with Janet Yellen about the unusual source of inflationary pressure, unusual and kind of ephemeral source of the inflationary pressure, I don't like what may happen further than in a year or two when we will see higher interest rates and government debt being more expensive. This may affect our ability to issue more bonds for capital investment because it will be more expensive. Plus, I'm really concerned that with Build Back Better plan and with infrastructure spending, on the one side, we will have significant influx of investment here in Arlington, significant. On the other side, construction costs, etc., will go up. this is how the economy works. So this concerns me. I think that, I mean, these are risk factors that we see coming ahead. I don't believe that there's any appetite among our colleagues to even come close to teasing any change on our AAA bond rating. So we will keep it very, very fiscally sound.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Are there any further questions for Takis? Okay, well, hearing none, we want to thank you again for conducting such a principled campaign and for bringing such wonderful outcome to the end of the campaign. And we want to thank you for joining us today. And we appreciate all you do for Arlington.
Thank you. Thank you. Your help has been very important, especially, and before I get to anything else, it's the psychological and political backing that you gave me throughout these very, very long year and a half plus. And I'm always here for you, for listening, for learning, and for informing you, and consulting with you. So thank you so much for everything that you do in Arlington. And onward. So lots of work to do. Who said that this is going to be? Nobody thought that this will be a walk in the park. So this is how democracy works. We'll have to taste defeat as well as victory, and I guess it's the reason why you send us to do this job, to manage this as well. So we will try to do our very, very, very best. It's great to see everybody. I hope everybody got your booster shots, right? That's important. That's very important. Remember last year when, from the previous federal administration, we had in place a capacity to vaccinate 12,000 people a week, and we were getting 3,000 doses. So that changed immediately when Joe Biden won the election. Actually, it took exactly 20 days until this, from inauguration day, until we got that going here in Arlington on the ground. This was vaccine doses arriving at our doorstep because of an election had changed the rules of the game. So we know what we have to do. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll see everyone on the second Tuesday of December. Thank you again for coming, Takis.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.